Picture this. You've spent, weeks preparing for this major job interview.
Right, the high-stakes moment.
Exactly. You put on your sharpest shirt, you sit down at your desk, you click the calendar link, and you just look into the webcam. But when the screen loads, the interviewer staring back at you isn't human.
Yeah.
It's a completely digital AI avatar, just unblinking, waiting to evaluate your every single word.
It's terrifying, honestly.
It sounds like a scene from some science fiction movie. But for thousands of people applying for jobs right now, that is exactly what's happening.
Yeah, and it represents this massive psychological shift in how we present ourselves. Because when you talk to a human, you rely heavily on social cues, right?
Yeah, for sure. You're looking for feedback.
Exactly. You look for a nod or a smile, or you use a little bit of small talk about the weather just to ease the tension in the room. But when you strip all of that away and face a machine, you are forced to communicate in a completely different, highly structured way.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because today's deep dive into our sources is all about this rapidly changing, algorithm-driven landscape of modern communication.
Yeah, it's a huge topic.
We're looking at a massive stack of research today. We've got technical notes, actual candidate reviews covering AI job interviews, AI-driven side hustles, and even the surprisingly scientific algorithms of human social interaction.
It all connects, really.
It does. And our mission today is to decode exactly how these automated systems evaluate us, how we can leverage AI for our own benefit, and how we can actually use these rigid rules to become vastly sharper communicators in our normal human lives, too.
Right. Because the underlying premise across all these sources is that knowledge is most valuable when it's understood and applied.
Absolutely.
Whether you are talking to a machine learning algorithm that's determining your career trajectory or just a group of humans at a noisy networking event, the mechanics of clear, confident communication are exactly the same.
So before you can thrive in the modern workplace, you have to get past the new gatekeepers. Our sources dive deep into platforms like Micro One, Merker, and Outlier.
Right, the big ones.
Yeah, and these platforms are utilizing AI recruiters. One of them is quite literally named Zara to conduct these 20 to 40-minute spoken interviews. So how does a piece of software actually evaluate a complex human being through a webcam?
Well, you have to visualize the AI not as a person, but as a digital highlighter. Or perhaps more accurately, an incredibly focused detective.
Okay, a detective.
Right. Because a human interviewer might get swayed because you made a charming joke or because you both happen to support the same local sports team.
Yeah, the classic small talk advantage.
Exactly. But the AI is entirely immune to that. It doesn't care about your jokes. Instead, it continuously scans your live audio transcript for a metric called semantic density.
Semantic density. What does that actually look like in practice?
It essentially means a high ratio of signal to noise. The AI is basically panning for gold. The signal represents your hard facts, quantifiable data points, and strong action verbs. And the noise is, well, everything else.
Like the filler words and stuff.
Yes, the filler words, the rambling context, the emotional throat clearing, and vague statements like, I am a really hard worker.
Right.
Let's say you're asked about a project failure. The noise-heavy answer is, oh, well, things got really crazy, and I tried my best to fix the database because everyone was stressing out.
Right, which sounds completely natural to a human, but it doesn't really say anything.
Exactly. A semantically dense answer would be, when the SQL database failed, I initiated a secondary backup protocol, which restored server uptime within 4 minutes.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, the AI completely ignores the emotional stress of the situation and solely scores that high-density signal.
And it's actively reading my words as I say them.
Yes, through a technology called chain of thought processing. As you speak, the system is transcribing your voice into text in real time.
Just live transcription.
Right. And then the underlying language model scans that text, specifically looking for syntactical joints.
Syntactical joints, like what?
It wants to see words like because, therefore, resulting in, and assuming.
Oh, to map the logic.
Exactly. It needs those structural words to map out the logical path of your answer. It is programmatically looking for clear cause and effect.
Reading through these candidate experiences, here's where it gets really interesting to me. This machine has flawless memory.
Oh, yeah. Perfect recall.
Because you upload your resume right before the interview, the AI indexes every single word instantly. There's a story in the sources where a candidate was asked to name the exact temperature and chemical solvent they used in a college lab report they wrote 10 years ago.
Yeah, that's wild. The AI dynamically generates branching follow-up questions based on those hyper-specific details from your path.
Which a human would never do.
Never. A human recruiter skims your resume for maybe 10 seconds before the call. The AI memorizes it completely and uses it to test the absolute limits of your technical depth.
It's like leaving an incredibly high-stakes voicemail on a telephone. There's no one there nodding to encourage you. There's no one smiling to make you feel comfortable.
Right, you're just talking to a wall.
And most terrifyingly, there is no one to stop you and ask, wait, what do you mean by that? You are just talking into the void. But honestly, this testing method sounds inherently flawed to me.
How so?
Well, doesn't the AI dock you for having a non-native English accent or for using slightly incorrect grammar? That seems like a massive disadvantage for ESL candidates.
It's a very common concern, yeah. But the research shows the reality is quite the opposite, actually.
Really?
Yeah. Modern AI screening systems are trained on massive global data sets featuring millions of regional accents. They are highly advanced at parsing phonetic variations.
Oh, wow.
And more importantly, the AI is completely blind to physical manifestations of anxiety. It doesn't log if your hands are shaking, if you are sweating, or if you aren't making perfect eye contact.
That's actually a huge relief.
It is. It's not an English teacher grading you on perfect syntax or poetic delivery. If your grammar is slightly off, but you clearly explain the logical steps of how you solved a complex engineering problem, the AI awards you a high score for that specific skill.
Okay, so knowing how the AI hears us is only half the battle. We need to know how to strategically feed it what it wants without triggering its mechanical traps.
Right.
And the sources detail some massive pitfalls here. The biggest one seems to be the silence trap.
Oh, the silence trap can ruin an interview instantly.
Walk us through that.
Well, in a normal human interaction, if you get hit with a difficult question, you might look up at the ceiling and sit in total silence for 5 or 6 seconds to gather your thoughts.
Yeah, of course.
To a human interviewer, that body language clearly signals, I am thinking. But the AI relies entirely on voice activity detection, or VAD.
Meaning it's just listening for raw decibels.
Precisely. VAD monitors audio frequencies. If the decibel level drops below a certain threshold for a programmatic set of time, usually around 2 to 3 seconds, the system assumes you have finished your answer.
2 to 3 seconds. That is insanely fast.
It is. It cuts off the recording and immediately fires the next question. You lose your chance to answer entirely.
Wow. So how do you buy yourself time to think without the machine cutting your microphone?
You have to utilize the speak to pause method. You literally narrate your internal thought process out loud.
Like actually saying what you're thinking.
Yeah. You say, let me consider the variables for a second, or let me structure my approach to this specific scenario before I begin.
Well.
This continuous audio keeps the microphone active, but it also has a secondary benefit. It proves to the chain of thought algorithm that you utilize a methodical, structured approach to problem solving.
Speaking of structure, career coaches always talk about the STAR method, right? Situation, task, action, result.
Right, the classic formula.
For human interviews, it's just considered best practice. But for an AI interview, the sources frame it as a literal mathematical necessity.
Because the AI is using that chain of thought processing to evaluate your transcript, it needs to parse strings of text into distinct categories.
Okay.
When you use the STAR method, you are perfectly formatting your story into data arrays that the algorithm can instantly categorize.
Like filling out a form verbally.
Exactly. You are serving up the context, the objective, your specific intervention, and the measurable outcome in exactly the order it was programmed to ingest them. You're handing the machine a perfectly mapped equation.
But there's a subtle trap hiding inside that method too, according to the sources. The we trap.
Yes, this one catches a lot of people.
Because in a corporate environment, we're heavily conditioned to be humble. We say, our team worked hard to hit the deadline, or we successfully updated the software. The sources explicitly warn against using the word we with an AI.
You have to look at how algorithms isolate variables. The AI is interviewing you, not your entire department. If you say, we solved the issue, the machine literally cannot assign that data point to your specific profile. Did you write the backend code, or did you just order the coffee for the team?
It just has no idea.
It cannot infer context. You must use I. You have to declare, I analyzed the data, I proposed the new architecture, and I implemented the fix.
Okay, what if I get stuck? Say my resume mentions I touched a JSON file once, which is basically just a lightweight format for storing text data, and the AI suddenly asks me a hyper-specific convoluted question about JSON parsing.
A nightmare scenario for most candidates.
Truly. Do I just guess?
Yeah.
Can I ask a machine to clarify? Or will it penalize me for not knowing the answer right away?
It won't penalize you at all. In fact, using a self-directed recovery, which just means asking the AI to rephrase or specify the question, is logged as a strong positive.
Wait, really? It likes when you ask questions.
Yes, you can say, could you provide a specific use case example of what you mean by that term? The algorithm is programmed to view clarification as a marker of strong critical thinking.
Oh, that makes total sense.
It demonstrates that you prefer to clearly define a problem's parameters before you blindly rush in to solve it.
So we've established how AI evaluates us when we want a job. But the power dynamic goes both ways.
It definitely does.
The sources transition from how we get hired by algorithms to how everyday people are utilizing AI to build highly lucrative side hustles. And they're doing it without knowing how to write a single line of code.
Yeah, the landscape of technology has rapidly shifted from pure software engineering to AI automation and orchestration. We are seeing the massive rise of a concept called vibe coding.
Vibe coding. How does that actually work in practice? I mean, it sounds made up.
It does, but it's very real. With developer tools like Bolt, users no longer need to write complex programming languages like Python or React.
Okay.
They simply type what they want a website or a piece of software to look and function, like in plain English. They describe the aesthetic and the utility, the vibes.
Just typing normal sentences?
Yeah. You might type, build me a landing page for a dog walking business with a booking calendar, a payment gateway, and a calming blue color scheme.
And it just builds it.
The large language model processes that English prompt and instantly generates thousands of lines of functional, complex code to build it. The human provides the creative direction, and the AI acts as the entire engineering department.
That is insane. The sources also detail something called digital plumbing, which uses AI automation platforms like Zapier, combined with a mechanism called semantic routing.
Semantic routing is fascinating because it gives the AI the ability to interpret intent.
How so?
Let's say a business receives hundreds of customer emails a day. The semantic router reads the incoming text and uses natural language processing to assign it a sentiment score.
Like seeing if the customer is mad.
Exactly. If an email says, my order is a week late and I'm furious, the AI flags words like furious and late, categorizes it as high urgency negative, and routes it directly to a human manager's priority inbox.
And what if it's just a routine request? Like no strong emotion?
If an email simply says, can I change my appointment to 8 p.m., the router scores it as routine. It then triggers an API call directly to the business's booking software, automatically changes the time slot, updates the central spreadsheet, and drafts a polite confirmation reply to the customer.
Without anyone touching it.
All within seconds, and no human employee ever has to see it.
Wait, if vibe coding and digital plumbing are really as easy as typing a plain English sentence into Bolt or Zapier, why are business owners paying freelancers $500 to $2,000 a month for this?
It seems like a paradox, doesn't it?
Yeah. Couldn't a restaurant owner or a clinic manager just type the prompt in themselves?
You have to consider the operational reality of a small business owner. They are completely consumed by the physical chaos of their daily operations.
Right. Managing staff, dealing with inventory.
Exactly. Putting out fires constantly. They simply do not have the mental bandwidth to learn a new AI platform dashboard, continually test the prompts, and troubleshoot the inevitable errors when an API connection breaks.
That makes sense. They're just too busy.
When they hire a freelancer, they aren't buying a tutorial on technology. They are buying their own time back.
So they were paying for the reliability of the finished result.
Exactly. The human value in the marketplace is no longer about raw coding ability. The value is reliably managing one specific AI workflow to bring structure and efficiency to a business's chaos. You transition from being a builder to being a digital manager.
Which brings us to the inevitable reality. Whether you are navigating a Micro 1 AI interview or pitching a vibe coding service to a local client, eventually you have to leave the screen.
Yes, the real world.
Eventually you have to interact with actual humans, and the sources draw an incredible parallel between the rigid, programmatic logic of AI communication and the psychological algorithms of human social interaction.
Humans are essentially running on deep evolutionary software.
I love that phrasing.
It's true. And just like an AI looking for semantic density, human interviewers have a highly specific filter for how they process information. The clearest example of this is the classic open-ended interview question. Tell me about yourself.
Ugh, it seems so polite and casual, but it's a massive psychological blind spot for most candidates.
Because it triggers the primacy effect. Human interviewers subconsciously decide if they like you and if they believe you are competent within the first 60 to 90 seconds of meeting you.
Only 60 seconds.
Yeah. If you start answering, tell me about yourself, by giving a rambling 10-minute chronological history of your childhood and your first part-time job at a grocery store, you have completely overloaded their cognitive filter. You've lost them.
It's exactly like a movie trailer. If a movie trailer is 3 hours long and shows every boring historical detail of the characters' daily lives, no one is going to buy a ticket.
Exactly.
The trailer is supposed to be a highly edited highlight reel that proves the movie is worth their time.
That's the perfect way to look at it. You are editing your professional life down to the exact 2 minutes that solve the interviewer's specific problem.
So how do we do that?
To do that without overloading them, the research suggests the present past future formula. You spend 30 seconds explaining exactly what you are doing right now.
Okay.
You spend 30 seconds on relevant past experiences that forged your technical skills. And you spend the final 30 seconds explaining how you want to deploy those exact skills for their specific company in the future.
And for the listener who maybe doesn't have a massive resume of past experience yet, the sources mention the SEAT method, or SEAT: skills, education, achievements, and the type of employee you are.
Yes, SEED is great.
It lowers the cognitive load for the listener because you are feeding them information in a predictable structure, just like feeding data arrays to an AI.
But let's take this outside the sterile environment of an interview room entirely. Let's look at the unspoken algorithm of joining a social conversation.
Okay, let's hear it.
Imagine you walk into a networking event or a crowded party. Everyone is already clustered in tight little circles talking. Why does it feel so physiologically intimidating to just walk up and introduce yourself?
The sources attribute that to the spotlight effect. And they cite a brilliant study from the year 2000.
Ah, yes, the Barry Manilow study.
It's so funny. Researchers made university students put on an incredibly embarrassing T-shirt featuring a massive picture of the singer Barry Manilow.
Which is pretty cruel, honestly.
Very. Then they instructed the students to walk into a room full of strangers. The students wearing the shirt estimated that roughly 50% of the room was actively staring at them and judging them.
And the actual percentage?
Less than 20%.
Wow.
We all suffer from this egocentric bias. We assume there is a bright, glaring spotlight tracking our every awkward movement. But the reality is, everyone else is completely preoccupied worrying about their own embarrassing T-shirts.
Knowing the spotlight is mostly an illusion lowers the stakes, but you still need a mechanical strategy to read the room. You can't just barge into any conversation. You have to analyze the feet.
Wait, their feet, not their faces or their eye contact.
Nope, their feet. Faces are trained to be politely smiling, even while the person's body language is screaming, "Please go away."
That's so true.
When we are deeply engaged in a private conversation, our torso and our feet naturally align squarely toward the person we are speaking with because our brain is focusing all sensory input there.
Okay.
If a group is standing shoulder to shoulder with their feet pointing directly inward to the center of the circle, that is a closed fortress. Do not interrupt them.
You're looking for the croissant.
Yes, the croissant. You want to look for a group shaped like a U or a V, where at least one person has their feet pointing slightly outward.
And what does that mean?
That outward pointing foot is a subconscious physical invitation. It signifies that the group's attention is not entirely locked inward, and they are open to new people joining the dynamic.
The sources also point out the 3.2 rule here. Human brains actually struggle to track and maintain more than 4 or 5 people in a single conversational thread.
Yeah, the cognitive load is just too high.
Right. Once a group hits 5 people, it naturally wants to fracture into a group of 3 and a group of 2. So if you see a large group of 5, you shouldn't feel like you are interrupting them. You're actually providing the catalyst to help them naturally fracture.
Yeah, exactly.
But once you spot that open group, you have to initiate within the 3-second rule.
The 3-second rule is a biological necessity. Once you spot the conversational opening or make brief eye contact, you must physically start moving toward them within 3 seconds.
Or what happens?
If you wait any longer, your amygdala, the fear center of your brain, starts processing the potential for social rejection. You start overthinking and doubting yourself. You have to physically move before the fear response kicks in.
Okay, so you walk up to the group. How do you actually claim the floor to speak? without awkwardly talking over someone else. The sources detail something called the inhale trick.
It relies on a deeply ingrained evolutionary reflex. When you hear a tiny pause in the conversation, you take a quick, audible breath in through your mouth.
Just a sharp inhale.
Yeah, that sharp intake of breath triggers an instinctual response in the people around you. Biologically, a sharp inhale signals that someone has either spotted a sudden threat or they are about to deliver new, important information.
That is fascinating.
The group will subconsciously stop talking and turn to listen. You literally claim the floor without having to say a single word.
And once you successfully have the floor, you deploy the ARE method.
Yeah.
ARE, anchor, reveal, encourage.
Right.
You anchor the conversation on a shared reality, saying something like, the audio in this room is incredibly loud. That establishes an immediate in-group dynamic and bypasses the stranger danger reflex.
Yep.
Then you reveal a tiny bit about yourself, like, I should have brought earplugs. And finally, you encourage them to speak by asking an open-ended question. Have you guys been to this venue before?
It's a completely structured, repeatable algorithm for generating small talk out of thin air.
But this raises a highly common scenario. What happens when you use that algorithm? You enter the conversation, and suddenly someone asks you a direct question about a complex political or economic topic, and your mind goes completely blank. You realize you have absolutely no opinion on the matter.
Yeah, that panic sets in.
You feel like the entire circle is waiting for a brilliant, insightful hot take, and you have absolutely nothing to offer.
Well, the research suggests that having no opinion is, paradoxically, a strong indicator of high intelligence.
Really? How so?
It's rooted in the concept of intellectual humility. The Dunning-Kruger effect demonstrates that people who possess the least amount of knowledge about a topic are usually the most aggressively confident in their opinions.
Oh, we all know people like that.
Right. True experts, people who actually comprehend the deep nuance and complexity of how the world works, are highly hesitant to declare absolute black and white truths.
The ancient philosopher Socrates built his entire historical legacy on the simple admission that he didn't know everything.
Which is incredibly freeing. When you are put on the spot, you don't need to panic or fabricate a stance. You just use a conversational pivot.
Like what?
You calmly say, I don't know enough about that to say for sure. I've honestly never thought about it from that angle. What do you think?
Oh, that's good.
It completely removes the pressure from your shoulders. It validates their interest in the topic. And because human beings generally love talking about themselves, they will gladly take the microphone right back from you.
We've explored some incredible mechanics today. From the strict, zero-tolerance logic required by an AI interview platform to the subconscious biological triggers of human networking.
It's a lot to process.
It is. But if we synthesize everything we've looked at in these sources, there is a surprising underlying truth. Mastering the rigid mathematical rules required to talk to a machine, like deploying the STAR method as data arrays, eliminating our rambling filler words, using the speak-to-pause method, and focusing purely on high-signal facts actually strips away our worst human communication habits.
It really does.
Training ourselves to satisfy an AI accidentally forces us to become much sharper, more precise, and more intentional communicators in our real lives.
And as we navigate this massive transition, the sources leave us with a vital question to consider.
What's that?
Well, we started today by picturing that webcam, looking into the digital eyes of an AI recruiter holding the keys to our career. As AI platforms become the ultimate, unavoidable gatekeepers to human employment, literally reading our resumes, calculating the semantic density of our answers, and scoring our spoken logic, how will we manage to preserve our genuine, messy human authenticity?
Wow.
Will we permanently adapt our natural speech to sound like highly efficient machines just to appease the algorithm? Or, as the technology continues to evolve and language models become infinitely more complex, will the algorithms eventually learn to understand and even reward the beautiful, creative, unpredictable nuance of the human voice?
That is definitely something to think about. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Take these frameworks, practice structuring your stories, look for those outward-pointing feet at your next event, and step confidently into your next conversation. Whether it's with a human or a machine,